Imagine a criminal so wealthy that rats literally ate over $1 billion of his cash each year, and it hardly made a dent in his fortune. Envision a drug lord who offered to pay off his country's $10 billion national debt to avoid prosecution. These aren't tall tales from fiction, but real stories from the world of organized crime. In the shadows of society, a handful of mob bosses amassed fortunes so vast and lavish that even today's tech billionaires would seem ordinary by comparison. Al Capone, Prohibition's public enemy, billionaire. In the 1920s, Al Scarface Capone ruled the streets of Chicago, and he ruled them like a CEO with a ruthless streak. During Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed, Capone built a bootlegging empire that raked in an estimated $100 million a year through illegal alcohol, gambling, and vice operations. To put that in perspective, $100 million in 1927 would be worth well over $1.5 billion today, and that was an annual revenue from his criminal enterprises. Capone's personal net worth in his heyday has been estimated at around $1.3 billion, making him one of the richest Americans of his era, legitimate or not. How did Capone use this wealth? He bribed police, judges, and even politicians to keep his syndicate running. He rode in bulletproof Cadillacs, bought diamond-encrusted jewelry, and hobnobbed with celebrities. Yet, despite effectively owning Chicago's underworld and living like a king, Capone's reign was also marked by brutal violence. The federal government eventually caught him, not for murders or bootlegging, but for tax evasion. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax fraud and sent to prison, ending his rule. Fat Tony Salerno, the mafia's billionaire boss. Meet Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, an old-school mafia don who quietly became one of the wealthiest gangsters in American history. Operating out of East Harlem, New York, Fat Tony ran the Genovese crime family's lucrative rackets in the 1960s, 1980s, from loan sharking to gambling, and made tens of millions of dollars in the process. As Italian mob influence shrank in some neighborhoods, Salerno moved in and filled the void, controlling numbers running and narcotics in Harlem. By the mid-1980s, Salerno had so much money flowing that Fortune magazine placed him at the top of its 1986 list of the 50 richest and most powerful mafia bosses, estimating Salerno's wealth at over $1 billion. Yes, Fat Tony was unofficially a billionaire mob boss, something almost unthinkable in Al Capone's day. Salerno, perpetually seen with a cigar and fedora, was not a flamboyant celebrity gangster. He preferred staying in the shadows of his social club. But his riches brought incredible influence. Law enforcement later downgraded the estimate of his personal fortune to around $500 and $600 million. But whether $500 million or over $1 billion, Salerno was without question the wealthiest mafia don of his era. He became the front boss of the Genovese family while the real godfather pulled strings from behind the scenes, meaning Fat Tony took the heat while enjoying the spoils of organized crime. Griselda Blanco, the deadly cocaine queen of Miami. In the 90s, long before cartels were a household name, Griselda Blanco proved that women could be kingpins, and ferocious ones at that. Dubbed the Black Widow and the cocaine queen of Miami, Blanco built a bloody cocaine empire that paved the way for the likes of Pablo Escobar. By the early 1980s, she was reportedly grossing around $80 million per month in drug profits, nearly $1 billion a year. Her total wealth at its peak reached an estimated $2 billion. This was unprecedented for a female crime boss, and it earned her a place among history's richest criminals. Blanco's life was a mix of luxury and violence. She ordered hits on rivals with impunity, even inventing the notorious drive-by motorcycle shootings that became a favorite assassination method in the cocaine trade. South Florida in her era was awash with drug money. Blanco spent lavishly on mansions, boutique clothing, and excesses rivaling any South Beach socialite, even as bodies piled up in the streets. By 1984, she was so feared in Miami that law enforcement pressure forced her to flee to California. Eventually, the DEA arrested Blanco in 1985, and she served about 10 years in prison on drug charges. Carlos Later, the cartel smuggler who bought an island. Not all kingpins were household names. Some operated behind the scenes but still made mountains of cash. Carlos Later is one such figure, a Colombian drug trafficker who co-founded the Medellin cartel alongside Pablo Escobar. At his peak in the late 1970s and early 80s, Lader's net worth reached about $2.7 billion, making him one of the richest criminals of all time. How did he do it? By revolutionizing the cocaine smuggling routes into the United States. Later set up operations on a private island in the Bahamas, Norman's Cay, which became a strategic way station for cocaine en route from Colombia to Florida. Lader's personal style was brazen and flamboyant. He idolized John Lennon and Adolf Hitler in equal measure, an unsettling mix, named his Bahamian property after the Beatles, and allegedly plastered Nazi imagery in his home. More tangibly, he purchased his own island, complete with a runway for drug planes and luxury accommodations for hosting cartel partners and bribe-hungry Bahamian officials. At one point, Lader was so wealthy and confident that he offered to pay off Colombia's national debt. Not once, but twice. It's true, in the early 1980s, Colombia's foreign debt was about $10 billion, and Lader openly volunteered billions of his own drug dollars to clear it, an offer the government forcefully declined. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies. If you've ever heard of a drug lord undergoing plastic surgery to change his identity, that was Amado Carrillo Fuentes, a Mexican cartel boss so rich and powerful he's remembered in legend as El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies. Carrillo earned this nickname by building a fleet of private jets, dozens of them, to traffic cocaine at an industrial scale for the Juarez cartel. By the 1990s, he was moving multi-ton shipments of cocaine from Colombia into Mexico, then into the U.S. using planes like Boeing 727s stripped of seats to pack in product. This massive operation made Carrillo Fuentes insanely wealthy, roughly $25 billion by the time of his death, rivaling Pablo Escobar's fortune. In fact, during the mid-1990s, Amado was believed to be the wealthiest drug trafficker in the world. With that money came an extravagant and cunning lifestyle. Carrillo Fuentes mingled with Mexico's elite, buying luxury houses, ranches, fancy cars, and even a high-end restaurant for money laundering and status. He reportedly slept under different roofs each night to avoid assassination or arrest, and he surrounded himself with armed guards and high-tech security. Yet, unlike some flamboyant drug lords, Amado tried to keep a low public profile. There are relatively few photos of him. He likely learned from watching the downfall of Escobar that too much fame could be fatal. Semyon Mogilevich, the Russian boss of bosses. Not all mob billionaires come with household names or Netflix series, and perhaps the most mysterious of all is Semyon Mogilevich. Often dubbed the boss of bosses of Russia's mafia, Mogilevich has been linked to organized crime across the globe, from Moscow's underworld to international money laundering schemes. With an estimated net worth around $10 billion, Mogilevich stands as one of the richest crime lords in modern history, proving that the collapse of the Soviet Union created its own breed of billionaire gangsters. Mogilevich, born in 1946 in Ukraine, built his empire initially through scams and smuggling in the 1980s. But the real money came in the 1990s after the fall of communism. He became an economic criminal mastermind. He's been accused of everything from arms trafficking and drug running to massive financial fraud. One of his notorious schemes was a giant money laundering operation through a Pennsylvania company called YBM Magnex, which duped investors and washed dirty money under the guise of a magnet manufacturing business. At one point, YBM Magnex was publicly traded and valued at $150 million before it was exposed as a front. Unlike the showy cartel bosses, Mogilevich kept a low profile, operating from the shadows and favoring boardroom deals over shootouts. He settled in Moscow, where he is believed to enjoy protection from high-level officials. In fact, Mogilevich is said to have powerful political connections. Reports have linked him to figures in the Kremlin, even alleged ties to President Vladimir Putin. The FBI has blamed him for orchestrating the murders of dozens who crossed him, yet he himself avoided the bloody public wars that characterized the Colombian or Mexican cartels. Instead, he ran his criminal conglomerate like a global enterprise. From Al Capone's bootleg millions to Pablo Escobar's narco billions, these stories prove that extreme wealth can be amassed outside the law. but always at a horrific cost. Nearly every mob boss on this list met a grim fate: prison, violent death, or lifelong exile. Their fortunes, no matter how large, were fragile and fleeting. And yet, the idea of the outlaw billionaire captivates us. A person so rich and powerful they seem to defy the normal rules of society. For a time, these kingpins did live as if they were untouchable. Yachts, mansions, private jets, gold-plated weapons, personal zoos, you name it. They wielded power through fear and money, rivaling governments and corporations. But in the end, their empires either imploded or were brought down by determined authorities. In a way, their stories serve as both inspiration and caution, thrilling tales of rags to riches via rebellion, yet ultimately warnings that crime's rewards are illusory. These mob bosses amassed unimaginable wealth, but in the end, none escaped the ultimate price. Power bought with blood never lasts. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden fortunes behind history's most infamous criminals, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And let us know in the comments which kingpin story you want us to explore next. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.